The stories contained in this podcast are the recollections of the guests we've invited onto the show. We are merely an outlet for people to share their truths, and we accept no legal responsibility for the stories contained herein.
I'm Kendra Sheets.
And I'm Rich Gill.
And this is Enough, a podcast which aims to shine light into the darkened corners of the music industry while discussing the ways we can and should improve ourselves and, in turn, our community.
Content warning. This podcast may contain frank and graphic descriptions of sexual abuse and assault, including instances of rape. These accounts can be triggering, specifically for those who have also experienced trauma, especially of a sexual nature.
If at any point during this podcast you feel yourself getting triggered, we suggest taking a break and taking care of yourself before continuing. But we do ask that you continue. These conversations are mentally taxing, but they are so important to have. Thank you. Welcome to another episode of the Enough podcast. I am one of the co-hosts, Kendra Sheets.
And I'm the other co-host, Rich Gill.
And today we are here with our guest, Nathan Gray of BoySetsFire fame.
Once was, and now Nathan Gray and the Iron Roses.
That's right. Could you give us a little bit of an intro about yourself and why you're on the podcast today?
I am here as your guest today because I like to talk. And anytime I'm asked if I would like to talk, I say yes.
Could you start off then by maybe sharing an experience or experiences that you've had over the last so many years of what you've seen when you're on tour or just in general in the music scene in regards to maybe like power dynamics, situations of like abuse or any sort of assault or just kind of strange situations like that you might have come across over the years?
That's an interesting question. I think for the most part, like I don't want to say I haven't seen anything. I feel like a lot of it, when you look into like the hardcore and punk scene, there's a lot of microaggressions. There's a lot of things that maybe you don't notice immediately out into the open until you get to a place where you allow yourself to notice it, you know? And that's one of the problems, and something that now I am very cautious about when I pick people for my band. When I give advice to new bands, one of my first advices that I ever give to a new band going out onto the road is to remember who they're playing to. And if they are not going to have respect for every single person in that room at whatever time of the day or night, then they shouldn't be on the road. And not only that, but that every single one of them should be holding each other accountable while on the road. And I don't think that people understand how important that is now. You see bands have their like road rules, they're going to respect others, how they're going to treat people in certain situations. And that's why we have so many situations where people are finally coming forward about abuse that they have been through from bands on the road, because bands do not hold each other accountable. They do not act with respect. They believe that they are owed something. And that is where all these problems stem from. Because the punk and the hardcore scene, despite the fact that we like to think we're a subculture, we have brought a lot of that toxic awfulness into this subculture. We haven't separated from that. We've allowed so much of that environment to come into what we do. And until we actually start working on that, we're not going to be an actual subculture. We're just going to be a little piece of a bigger puzzle. So over the 30 years I've been doing this, I've seen so many people like come forward. I've been in situations where I feel have been toxic, have been not respectful, just along the road, seeing people where you have to go over to them and say, "Hey man, what are you doing? You seem pretty drunk and so does she. What's going on?" You know, I've been very careful moving forward with the Iron Roses. And they have to know that the slightest altercation in any way will get them left on the road. Every one of them has had the speech. I'm telling you right now, you will be stranded at the club, find a ride home. Not going to happen. So that's sort of my story. That's my thing, is that I find it important that, and I hope other bands will sort of take up on that, and they'll start holding each other accountable, and they'll start thinking about who they're playing to. I mean, what's the point if you're going to go out there and disrespect people who have come and look up to you and see you as being something worth spending their money and their time on? How dare you? Like, make them uncomfortable, put them in situations where or abuse people. Like, that's insane to me. So it has been a big push of mine, especially with this new band and with advising younger bands on the number one rules of being out on the road is just that, to hold each other accountable and be respectful.
It's interesting that you say all that, because I have a friend who is a music lawyer, and he also has managed some bands, and he teaches a class about music management and stuff. And he tells his students, one of the first things is, he's like, look, this isn't the 1980s Motley Crue scene. Like, if you're out on the road, if you're going on tour, don't hit on your fans. Don't try to sleep with your fans. They're here because they like your music, and they want to see you because of the music. And you have to remember that, like you said, and treat them with respect.
I love it. Yeah, I love that. And that's the thing. What are you there for? Is you know what I mean? Like, we're there to put forth music, and not only that, but like, especially with what we do, it's even more of, pardon the phrase, ministry. What we do, I don't know what else to call it. It was funny because someone came up to me after a show recently and was like, I feel like I just went through like a secular revival, like, and it was awesome. You know what I mean? And that people feel safe at our shows is incredibly important to what we do. And it should be incredibly important to what any band does, that people can feel like they can be there and just let loose and let go and be who they are without having to worry about what your creepy ass is going to do.
I definitely agree. I have the same point of view. I'm not in a band, so it's a little bit different for me to be like, this is why I'm here, and this is what I expect. And I definitely have felt that kind of, pseudo-religious experience before, where you're seeing a band and you get that moment. I think that everyone I know that I've talked to has had a moment, or a few of them, where and I'm sure I'll get them again once COVID's kind of like on its way out and I'm picking up my shows again, where you're just standing in that crowd and everyone's singing. And you just like look around and you're like, this is what it is. Like, this is why I'm here. This is why I do what I do. And I absorb all of this all the time. This is those exact, it's just like a toe to top of your head feel. But I think it's interesting because when we talk about punk or hardcore or some of these, small piece, like you said, out of the big picture type of genres, there's almost like an expectation for kind of that shock rock. So you get those like specific bands, I don't want to name names, but specific subgenres in certain punk of the overall punk umbrella, I guess, where they feel like going on stage and, pointing out someone and mocking them in the crowd, or, hitting on a girl while they're standing on stage, being look at this girl, like nice tits or whatever, just kind of this weird like jock mentality that's mixed in with punk. And we've seen it for a long time. I think we're starting to see it peter out a little bit more because of the way that the world is starting to turn. I know in my 20s, I went to a lot of shows where I saw that. And I'm not sure if it's something where it's petering out because of the times, or if I'm just getting old enough to be like, I'm never seeing these bands again. I'm not dealing with this shit. Like, I don't want to watch like a 60-year-old person sing about like pop punk songs about hitting on chicks. Like, as like punk and hardcore fans and just people in this group, we want to be the exceptions. We're always making exceptions for why these things are okay.
Yeah, absolutely. And that has to stop. Plain and simple. Fuck those bands. Who gives a shit about those fucking bands? I think it's important that we all begin to stop making excuses for that type of behavior and saying, that's wrong. It's not relative. It's not opinion. That shit's wrong. Fuck it. We don't put up with all kinds of other mess. Why put up with that? So yeah, I wouldn't make an excuse for any of that. And I don't know if it's that kind of stuff. It comes and goes, you know what I mean? It goes in waves. Those assholes are the ones that are now like, oh, cancel culture is fucking.
Yep.
Yep.
So boring. Like, it's just the same old crap over and over again. No one will listen to me with 30 microphones in my face. Like, it's just like, it's awful. But that's those people, you know what I mean? That's how they get a following anymore. They sort of create their own counterculture to the counterculture, which is basically the culture. You're just like an over-exaggerated version of what the world already is and what we were fighting against, you idiot. So yeah, you're not wrong at all. You're right. It's that shit sucks, and it seems to always come in and out of the scene. And you always have those bands that are going to come in and like, we're going to be shocking and blah blah. It's not shocking. Frat boys have been doing that for centuries. I don't know what like. There's nothing shocking about it. You're just a dick.
Right.
Yeah. I wanted to ask you about a specific thing that a friend of the podcast, Tim, who was on a previous episode, who kind of put us in touch together, spoke about at a festival back in the 90s. Something came out about someone in one of the other bands assaulting or harassing someone, and you guys straight up like stopped the festival and had sort of like a roundtable discussion about what to do. Can you speak a little bit about that? And I mean, you know, that was in 1998 before these conversations were really happening. So that's amazing.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. And I caught a lot of shit from some hardcore scene dudes that can fuck off straight. So what happened was it was a More Than Music festival, and it was Code 13. Felix von Havoc, I believe his stupid ass name was. But they were playing, and I didn't think much about it at first. You know, I mean, they're just a punk band, whatever. Like, it just didn't, you know, until he made some dumb comment about, I don't know any kind of feelings but rage, and blah. He was saying dumb shit, right? So I was like, okay, well, this is boring. But it didn't really hit anything until there was literally a woman in the audience that was like crying and freaking out and screaming at him from the audience. And he was just like, oh, fuck you, bitch. I didn't fucking do anything, blah, blah. And she's screaming about how he had assaulted her. So here's the thing. At this moment, it doesn't matter whether she could have just been in crisis. It's very possible that maybe he didn't, but that wasn't the point. The point is she was going through something. And what happened was he turned the crowd against her, and the crowd started yelling at her until she ran out crying. So when we got up on stage, we had full intention of playing, actually. But what I started out the show with was, look, what we saw yesterday was fucked up, and no one has said anything about it. And that's crazy to me. And I went through what was wrong with it, what the hell was going on, you know what I mean? And as I was going through that, people are like yelling at me and just fucking play and that kind of bullshit. But I also noticed that people were like locked in, you know what I mean? And there were people that needed to hear that it was okay that they didn't feel good about yesterday. Because I think that about the day before, because I think there were a lot of people there that were just sort of like, if I say something, they're going to yell at me too, you know? And they needed someone on stage with a lot of people and a microphone to say, no, you're right. You're absolutely right. And as I kept talking, people started coming up and wanted to say something too about their experiences in the scene, how they had been assaulted, how they had been heckled, and they had been, you know what I mean, put down for coming out about what had happened to them. And at that moment, I took the mic back after somebody had talked, and I was like, I think it's pretty obvious we're not going to play now. There are people lining up to talk on this microphone right now, and we're going to give them a voice for our set. And that was it. We had people line up and talk about their experiences with being raped and assaulted and being shunned and being laughed at and being, you know, and I went to other bands. Braid was one of the bands that also gave up their time slot for this. So I want to put that out there as well. They were awesome. After a while, it sort of petered out and we went on our ways and everybody was talking and sort of went on with the day. But at that moment, it was awesome. And I remember the guy that ran Ebullition Records, Kent McClard, like got in touch with me. It was like telling me I was an asshole for like fucking with his boy or whatever. I was like, really? I thought you were one of the good guys. You know what I mean? Like I listened to Abolition Records. I like his zine Heart Attack or whatever. Like I was like, that blows me away. And I was on the phone with him. Like, this blows me away that you are this guy. This makes no sense to me. So fuck him too. And Code 13 and whatever the fuck they are now. Who knows? Bunch of old fucking farts with mohawks. Who gives a shit? So that's what happened. And from that point on, it was pretty cool to see people come to other shows, especially in the Ohio area and Michigan and stuff like that, and come out who were at that festival that would come to shows because that happened. And we're like, that made me feel so important. And that was what changed my viewpoint completely on what music was. You know what I mean? It's not just music. And especially at a festival called More Than Music. You know what I mean? And it was so awesome to me to realize that music could be something more. That could be something that could provide healing and could provide a safe place for people that needed that. So that's what I've been trying to do since.
That's amazing. I feel like for so many people, it obviously is so much more than music, especially when you get to these kind of smaller niches of a larger music scene, right? So you find your little group or your city, and you know, Chicago's got an amazing punk scene. I feel very comfortable here, or I did. And then you get to the point where I'm just kind of in this weird place where like I always turned to music since I was young, very young. And I kept kind of honing in on exactly where I felt like I belonged and where I wanted to be. And it's let me down so much in the past so many years where I find out that so many people don't. I really thought that they did have the opinion and the point of view that you just said, that it needs to be a safe place. It needs to be a place where it is more than music, where we're a community and we, you know, empower each other and keep each other protected. And it can be so much more than just kind of vibing with a specific song or really like relating to certain lyrics. But I feel like over the past maybe 5 to 7 years specifically, I felt with everything coming out with Me Too and just these conversations coming out more and more. So I'm watching more and more people that I thought give a shit realize that they just don't give a shit. And like really disappointing, because now I feel like I'm almost taking a back burner to something that was such a major part of my life, because I just don't trust that anyone's in it for what I think the right reasons are anymore. And so, I mean, I don't even know what I would do if I was at a festival and all of that went down and someone was just like, let's openly talk about what's going on here. I mean, that would be like earth shattering, even now in 2020. And that happened in 1998.
It has been something that I've brought forward into everything that I do. And before I continue with that, I'm very sorry that's happened. That disillusionment that you've had to experience sucks. And I'm sorry that that's happened, because that isn't what music should be for you. And you have every right to feel the way that you do. So what I've tried to do is to always speak up in these manners then, you know, when these things happen. Just recently, the Iron Roses, we played in Baltimore, and the opening artist, Black Guy Fawkes, Ian, and our guitarist, Phil, who is also a black man who plays guitar, all through this tour, people had this issue getting them confused because they're two black guys who play guitars. Now, a lot of that was a lot of microaggression that we called out and we did things about and yada, yada. But the worst thing that happened, we were in Baltimore and a sound guy literally after sound check looked at both of them and went, okay, which one are you?
Oh,
they
wow.
were like, what? And our other guitarist, Jared, was like, what do you mean by that? And the guy immediately started getting defensive and was like, look, I'm not racist. I wasn't saying that because I'm racist. Then before anybody could even say anything, he goes, why don't you cry about it? Why don't you write a song about it?
Wow. And this is the sound guy at a club you're playing.
The sound guy at the Metro. Now, before I move on, the Metro handled this awesomely. Okay. So everybody else at that club, mwah, salt of the earth, love them. They were great. So, but this is what happened. Now, in these situations, what happens a lot of times? So Ian and Phil and Jared and a couple other folks in the bands came back to the dressing room and told me what happened. Now, what normally happens at that point is that everybody goes, wow, that sucks. What a dick. And that's it.
Mm-hmm.
I said,
Right.
I'm sorry, 1 second. Got up, walked right past the sound guy, went straight to the promoter and went, that guy's got to go right now. And he said, what's going on? I'm like, and he started looking at me. I said, I'm not talking to you. I'm talking to him. I've got no time to talk to assholes like that. This is what just went down. He has to go home now. Do you know another sound guy? And to their credit, they were like, absolutely. I'll talk to him now. I will send him home. We'll bring in another sound guy. And within a half an hour, they had a new sound guy in there. The show went on, which was great. And the rest of that club, just awesome. From the bartenders to the promoter to the door guy to everybody, they were so supportive. They were so awesome. It was just that one dude. But here's the thing. If you don't speak out against that one dude controls the night.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's not okay. So to the point is that this needs to happen in every aspect. When someone is being misogynistic, when someone is being racist, when someone is being transphobic, when someone is being homophobic, no matter what it is, jokes aren't jokes anymore. You know? And I don't mean that in a sarcastic way. I mean that in a dead fucking serious way. Jokes hurt people. Like these things that we call jokes that we just fuck around with, like, oh, I was just kidding. No, you weren't just kidding. That comes from someplace. Those hurtful things destroy other people's lives, and that's not funny. So it's important that us as musicians, I try to be cautious not to say everybody at the club. You know what I mean? I think that people that come to watch the show should be the ones who feel safe and protected in that situation. I think it's up to the bands and the people who run the clubs and things like that to make sure that that time is had. And it's something that we as musicians need to work better at. We need to stop seeing shows as, oh, I'm just there to have fun. I'm just there to play a show. Not really. Not really. You have a bigger responsibility, and whether you want to accept that responsibility at all shows your character.
In addition to what you said about, if you don't say anything to that sound guy, then he runs the night. The other thing is it normalizes that behavior, and it makes him think, maybe not even consciously, but just like, oh, well, they just kind of laughed it off. So that's okay. And like you said, we have to speak up about stuff like that on every level.
Yeah. I can promise you that's why he even got to that point where he was able to say that to other human beings, was right. Because it's been accepted before. It's been blown off, or people just didn't want to be uncomfortable. It's like, oh, that sucks, but I don't want to say anything and cause a scene. Cause a fucking scene. Always cause a scene. When the question is cause a scene or don't, cause the scene. Right? Mm-hmm. It is also important for us to, in love, call out those that are just performative, and maybe even try to guide them in the right direction. Like, hey, look, that's great, but here's the next step.
Yeah. Doing this podcast, we have had a number of episodes that ended with some tumultuous situations.
Oh no.
Yeah, a little backlash here and there. And one of the things that has come up a number of times in private conversations between Rich and myself and other people in labels or bands in general are just this kind of idea of people wanting to do something when these things come up, but almost feeling like their hands are tied because of a position that they've been put in. Like, they have a specific, they're a band on a specific label. They don't want to lose their following. They want to, they don't want to side with anyone in particular because they want to make sure they can book shows still. I love your face when I'm saying all of this, because
you probably know what my answer is going to be to all that.
Yeah. Smirk is just moving from one side to the other, like. And I mean, based on what you're saying, it's so refreshing, because in talking to you, there is no other option. You are doing what you know is the right thing to do, and there is no waffling on that, and there is no what if. You're like, fuck these people if they don't like me. I don't need you as fans of anything that I do. And that's so empowering. Do you have any advice that you could give? Because I feel like so many people in this situation, in all of this, in regards to just kind of like the Me Too movement and not call out culture per se, but just making these very tricky situations more public. I mean, it's been something that's been going on for decades, probably for centuries, but now we're at the point where we're actually being able to speak about these things in a more open forum. And I feel like so many people are saying, like, they don't have a guidebook on what to do. It's too new for them. How do they handle this? They're just not sure. So they just don't do anything and they sit on the back burner and they just enjoy listening to bands continually. It's easier to keep listening to the band that they love than facing the fact that there's a person in the band that may be a rapist or a racist or a homophobe.
It's very difficult for me to think of nice ways to put it. You know, for people, what's that one band that hired somebody to fucking kill his wife and they're still fucking touring? Like that metal band, whatever fucking, yeah. I can't remember their name. And if I knew it, I would say it. I just can't remember it. And they're still touring around. Nobody gives a fuck. But when, you know, violence against women and all this kind of shit, you'll put that tag up there on your Instagram and you'll talk about how important it is to protect women. But that nothing? No, metal's too important. Right. Gotcha. Okay. Nothing's more important. Your music, fuck your music, fuck your label, fuck your band, fuck it all. Not important. None of it. When it supports rape culture, when it supports misogyny, when it supports racism, when it supports transphobia, when it supports any of this shit, it's not important. That music means nothing now. It's a couple of empty chords. Who gives a shit about it? Is it catchy? Probably. Does it matter? No. And the only advice I can give you is stop being an asshole. Because that's what you're being. You're being a coward by supporting this. And I couldn't give a flying fuck if you hate me about it. People hate me all the time. I'm good with it. You know? All right. I mean, what's really going to happen at the end of the day? What? I'm not going to play to as many people? All right. Like, at least the people who are there are going to be good people. I don't have time for it. But if your main concern over the safety of women, over the safety of people of color, over the safety of trans folks, over the safety of anyone in the LGBTQIA plus community, if your concern isn't with them, you're on the wrong side and you should fuck off. I got no advice for you but that. You're on the wrong side, fuck off.
And a lot of times I think when people scream cancel culture, what they're really upset about is accountability culture, which
without a doubt,
you know, and there's this quote that I've read, I don't remember who said it, but sometimes the most loving thing you can do is hold someone accountable. And, you know, it's easy to sit on behind your keyboard and like tweet about some huge band that you're never going to meet or ever come close in contact with and be like, these people are terrible. They did this and this and this. But when it's your friend or bandmate or relative, your beliefs really come into play. Like, how much do you really care about this to talk to your friend or your neighbor or bandmate?
Yeah. And that's a very important point. What do you do at the dinner table? When your dad or your mom or your uncle or what do you do there? I know what I do. I don't tolerate it. I don't tolerate it from fucking anybody, because when you tolerate it, that's how dead bodies happen. And that's not a hard pull. That's how it happens. We normalize jokes. We normalize stupid comments all the way up until George Floyd is laying dead in the street, until another trans life is taken, until another trans child hangs themselves in their fucking room. What's more important? A fucking song? A fucking band? Fuck you. That's all there is to it. And people can get mad all day, but at the end of the day, I'm thinking about that kid that had no other fucking option but to put a gun in their fucking mouth. So fuck your band. Fuck everything about your band. Doesn't matter. What matters is that we are speaking the truth. What matters is that we are standing up for those who need us the most. And if nobody wants to follow along, hold your candle up that much higher.
I love how passionate you are when you speak about this stuff. And it just makes me wish that there were not even more people like that in the music world, but just in the world in general, because I think we'd all be in a much better place.
Let me tell you why. And I think this is a very important thing for everyone to think about. I say this a lot at shows. We have a limited amount of time on the face of this earth. And because of that, our time is very precious. Now, I want everyone to think about that in terms of that trans girl or boy that's struggling to be accepted. How dare any of us make their time on this earth hard? We don't have a lot of time. And that someone's full fucking time on this earth was spent being miserable? How dare you? That's vile and disgusting that anyone would allow others to suffer, that anyone would allow that small time we have to be wasted. And that's what I think of every time. I don't think of the angry faces pissed off at me. I don't think of the assholes typing away on their stupid phones or computers. I don't think about the DMs or the fucking, oh, I'm going to kill you. No, you're not. Shut up. You know, I don't think about that shit. I think about the human beings that need us and the human beings whose lives are going to be wasted in misery. How dare any of us be silent in light of that?
With all of these thoughts and almost like guidelines in a way that you've decided to live your life both on stage and off, was this something that you came to early on, or was it something that you kind of adapted as you moved through, you know, the scene and culture and just kind of grew up and started to absorb more of the world?
Wish I'd come across it earlier than I did. And to this point, I think it's important to sort of share this story as maybe it can tell people about redemption and about hope. So starting way back when I was young, as a kid, I suffered sexual abuse in the church that we were in. And growing up through that and pushing it down and not really dealing with it. Once I got up into my 20s and 30s, I was a pretty angry guy. I mean, you can listen to BoySetsFire and see that. But like when you are only angry, your anger can be misdirected and your anger can be manipulated and used. And I came to a point, I cannot remember the actual year of it, but it wasn't long ago enough for me to not be embarrassed about it. But it was during a time when Islamophobia was on the rise. It was huge. It was well after 9/11, but I got myself caught up on my personal Facebook page, which has since been erased, where I was saying a lot of the wrong shit. And I was saying hurtful things that cost me some fans who were like, nope, not dealing with this shit. Whatever you're on, we don't want it. And I remember actually some of the guys in BoySetsFire sitting me down and was like, hey, we can't get back on stage when you're saying this shit. Like, it's just, this isn't right. And I was so lost in my anger. And what I found was as I started getting healing for the brokenness, for the anger that I had at religion from my past, that I was then, projecting onto Islam and things of that. You know what I mean? I had found an enemy. I had found a way to like hate something that I somehow connected with my abuse. When I started getting healing for that, I started realizing how awful some of the things I was saying and how wrong I was. This is a point that I think a lot of people who are getting canceled need to take heed on. You have an opportunity right now. I had an opportunity at that moment to finally go, oh no, what have I done? And I spent a good year posting apologies. And not only that, but also directly the other way, putting my money where my mouth was. towards refugees and things of that nature, like, because I just said a lot of awful things that I had no right to say. And I think it's important to know that even those who are in the place I'm in now haven't always been. And that's what's so cool about hope and change, is how possible it is. You know, if we just let go of the hurt and the brokenness that's causing it. Because these people that I've been saying, fuck them, whatever, you know why they're there? Because they're hurt. They're broken inside. The object that they're going out against isn't what it seems to be. And I can guarantee that. And I can remember even recently with the January 6th riot, remembering where I was, we all sort of do, and like that all going down. And my first reaction of being like angry and like, what the fuck is going on and all this shit. And then really taking a second after it had all gone down and hearing some of these people being interviewed and stuff like that. It's like, oh, they have no idea why they're actually angry. They're just angry.
And confused.
They're hurt, they're angry, they're confused. And all they're saying is, what about me? No one cares about me. And that's where this happens. And there's a point to having discernment between the fuck yous and the, hey, I might be able to help this person. My experience is that I have not always been at this place. And I've been in those hurtful situations, and I've hurt other people. And there's a moment where when you're the one doing the hurting, you need to realize how to change that. And not to immediately go for the easy answer. The easy answer is going, oh, they're trying to cancel me, blah, 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 and trying to gain fame through your hatred. And instead of that, humbling yourself and saying, I was absolutely wrong. There's no excuse. There's no ifs, ands, buts about it. I was wrong, and I'm going to start changing it. And then allow people to watch you change. Don't say it. Don't tell them how you're changing. Just do it. And allow them to come back when they're ready. And if they're never ready, that's okay. You fucked up, So that's what I hope for others who have fallen into this situation where they become so angry and hateful, and that at some point they'll have that moment of clarity where they go, oh no, and change. But it's not going to take me. It's not going to take anyone. It's going to take them. It's just like anyone that has an addiction. You can't change someone with an addiction. They have to want to change themselves. No one changes unless they want to. So the hope is there that there will be change. But until then, we also have to defend those who get hurt by those people who are refusing to change. So it's a complex situation. But that's the only complexity to it, not in how we react to it. How we react to it is to immediately defend the people who need our defense. Later down the road, maybe you get in touch with those people. Maybe you try to have a conversation with them. Maybe you try to get them to see where they're at and find their way on their own. But, the immediate thing is, all right, fuck you.
A phrase we use all the time on this is people can change. And you can come back from stuff like this. It might take a while. It's not going to be I'm going to leave social media for 6 months and then pop back up like nothing happened. If you do the work, and we don't throw people away, we want people to change and come out the other side a better person. And you just showed that that's 100% possible.
Nobody wants to put forth the work. They just want to be able to okay, sorry, like you said, get off social media, come back in 6 months, everything's fine. There's another factor to this, is that not everyone's going to forgive you.
Right. Exactly.
People are going to get, and here's the thing, you have to let them. There's nothing you can do about it. You can't fight them. That's not going to make it better. You just have to say, well, I am very sorry. And if you need to walk away, please do. I am going to have to forgive myself at some point. And if you can't, I can fully accept that I have broken your trust. And that just is what it is. I have seen a lot of people come back because they've seen over the years where I've come to. There are some folks that I probably will never speak to again, not because I don't want to, but because I broke that trust and they can't. And that's fine. That is what it is, and I wish them the best, and they deserve that feeling. They are allowed, not deserved, they are allowed to feel that way. And we have to stop trying to control the way other people view us. Only thing you can do is the right thing as best you possibly can.
Are you a licensed therapist? Because I could meet with you every Monday around 7 o'clock for about an hour. I'm very happy. I feel like I've learned so much about myself in the last few minutes.
Thank you so much.
You both kind of touched on this. Nathan, what you were talking about with your personal situation, and Rich kind of addressed it with the removing themselves from social media. We've seen a lot over the last few years of someone in a band or in some sort of musical project, or even actors, actresses being quote unquote called out for something, and then making that very public, like Facebook apology or Twitter apology statement, which is so sorry, been going through a lot, really overdid the drinking, working on my 90 days, those kind of things. I feel like they're pulling it off of like some sort of like downloadable online template. And then they just, post it on their social media profiles. But one of the things that we've seen, or I guess have not seen in a lot of these cases is what you were talking about here, is that people are doing this almost in a very performative public kind of way, being like, I must do this to salvage my image. This is my attempt at positive PR for myself. Going to keep it low key on social media for a while, going to cancel that leg of the tour, and I'll be back in 3 months. And hopefully, I'll play some small shows and we'll get back to this in a few months. But those things never seem to really get checked off in any sort of like public way. You never really see that these people are getting any better. They just reemerge after like 6 to 12 months and everything kind of seems the same. And then you see them cracking the same jokes on stage or making the same comments all over again. Like they've gotten away with it for so long. So when they get to the point that they need to do something, they're going to do it to save face, but really have no interest in changing because change is hard. And why would I want to do that? I mean, I was fine with the way it was before, so might as well just keep moving forward this way and hope nobody notices. And I feel like we've seen so much of that in like probably 85 to 90% of the situations that have happened over the last so many years, at least in the punk scene, from what I've seen. We don't really see the change following up. We have a list of what they're doing to better themselves, and then there's a quiet, and then they reemerge on a stage at your local dive bar, and then they're back touring again. Everything that you have made it to be for yourself, or everyone involved in any of the bands you've been in, and the people who attend your shows, it makes me keep thinking about the fact that like these people are touring nationwide. And we're allowed to, I'm at the point where I think I'm just old enough where I'm like, kids are going to these shows with these dangerous adults. Where before I would be like, I'm the kid going to the show with the dangerous adults, but I'm just
yeah.
Or I'm starting to worry about the people that are attending some of these all ages shows, or even like the 18 and up shows, because I know the things that happened to or around me when I was that age. Like 16 years old and there's like 30-year-old guys trying to get my phone number. So I just keep thinking about like the kind of dichotomy between the musical world that it seems like you've crafted around yourself and this very strange cesspool that I feel like the rest of us are kind of living in.
It's definitely a less predatory area.
Yeah. I mean, it's quality over quantity, I'm sure. And it sounds like that's fine at this point.
Yes. I wish there was an answer other than guys need to get their shit together, because you're right. You could ask any woman in the scene, they'd have a million stories for you. And that's one of the things, is that we need to recognize that and how scary that is. Because we have normalized that as well, that every woman in the hardcore and punk scene has a story, at least one, of that kind of bullshit. And that should freak us out. That shouldn't be like, oh yeah, whatever. That's just dudes having fun. That's what the frat boys say. That's what the world out there says, not our group. Even if it's not straight up like assault, just the microaggressions of women being ignored or not being able to have a voice or being cut off when they're trying to speak. It's rampant within our own scene. And the only thing that can change that dudes to fucking change it. You know what I mean? That's it. Is that we have to understand our place in this and how we create these hostile environments and how we can change that and how we can stop looking at women for what they can give us. And instead, as, oh, everyone here are human beings with needs, you know, and we all have something to give, and we all have needs, and we all have a place here. And that is unfortunately the mindset that a lot of dudes that look exactly like me get trained to do, to be dismissive, to bottle our emotions, to be toxic. And it's a pretty common phrase, but hurt people hurt other people. But another phrase that we need to carry along with that is hurt people aren't allowed to hurt other people. You don't get to hurt people because you're hurt. That's not an excuse. And that's, to your point, as you were saying, those sort of templates where it's like, sorry, I did that, but. No, there's no but. You don't get to hurt people because you're drunk. You don't get to hurt people because you got hurt. There's no but in the situation. You hurt people. You are sorry for hurting people. Now you're going to figure out how to make amends for that, whether folks can accept it or not. You are going to change yourself because you know that you need to change yourself. And that's really the only way to do it. Those templates, like you were saying, and all that, it's all horse shit. Because no change is made, no honesty is had. It just is check yes or no, check that, you know what I mean? And they just build these templates with their lawyers to say whatever they need to say to get out of whatever they need to get out of. And then the problem is that then we have bootlickers that come around and pressure women and other people into accepting the apology, you know, or at least shutting up, whether you accept it or not, just shutting up. Like, how dare you? Here's the thing. Abusers and narcissists, what they do, the immediate way you can tell that they're not changing is they get mad at you for not accepting their apology. The second someone gets upset with you for not accepting their apology, that's narcissistic and abusive behavior. The way that this happens is you apologize, and if someone can't accept it, you accept that and realize that you have fucked up so badly that you have wounded trust. And you say, I can accept that. And I'm very sorry I put you in that position. And you step the fuck off. But until we start doing that, like, it's all performative bullshit.
Yeah. Accountability is so hard for so many people. Saying like, I fucked up is really, really hard. It's hard for me. It's hard for everyone. But it's something that's so necessary, especially nowadays. I mean, I can do it easily in business, but when it comes to my social ties, it's so much harder for me. I'm like, why is that? And I had to kind of sort through all of that in my own personal kind of quest to figure out like who I am and can I be better and how do I make myself a person, you know, closer to the person that I'd like to be. And I feel like when those people write those boilerplate template, you know, Facebook apologies, it's just like we talked about. There's no accountability. It's just checking off a box. And when they get upset because the apology is not being accepted, they're mad because they can't move forward because the box didn't get ticked. So they're kind of stuck in this weird limbo. So I did this thing, you're supposed to accept it so I can move on with my life. Except for the fact that they did something so detrimental that you'll never get over it as a person. They have impacted you through abuse or assault or, you know, these just jokes that are really, you know, so deeply triggering and hurtful in so many ways. But they're like, I said I was sorry. I can't get on with my life because you won't. Come on, what's wrong with you? And you're like, but you did something that I will never get over. I don't need to accept your apology. At that point where they are not getting their apology accepted, they can't check off that box. I think if their reasoning behind doing all of this was true, to grow themselves, to be self-reflective, they wouldn't have those emotional, like, you know, instantaneous emotional reactions. They'd be like, okay, this is upsetting. I will need to move on despite this fact that's happening because I need to grow myself. But so many of the situations we've seen, people get mad because it's all performative.
You are absolutely correct. And that is putting the wrong priorities on the wrong shit. Sorry, your band doesn't matter. Your label doesn't matter. These things don't matter. What matters is humanity.
I feel like if dudes my age had listened a little more closely to the stuff we were listening to, like 7 Seconds, Propagandy, BoySetsFire, Ignite, a few other, sort of bands in that genre. If we'd listened a little more closely to the lyrics and listened to what you guys were really saying, we might be in a different place right now, because all this stuff was being talked about. A lot of us just weren't listening.
And almost more importantly, not only were we not listening to those bands, we were not actively going out and listening to bands that weren't a bunch of white dudes.
Right. Naked Aggression, Spit
Yeah.
Boy.
Yeah. Bikini Kill,
Bikini Kill.
Los Crudos, so many bands that were out there. We didn't do that. And I think that a lot of the bigger bands like us could have probably done a better job of pointing the way as well and saying, hey, let's give some time and some space to these other bands. Something that I've tried to do now that I actually feel very remorseful about that we didn't do with BoySetsFire is bring more bands out that had people of color, that had women, that had, it just wasn't on our radar at the time. And that's not an excuse. It's a reason, it's not an excuse. And that is something that I've tried to fix recently, because people don't know a lot of time. If other bands aren't bringing out these bands or aren't being those bands themselves. When I looked into my group of friends with this band, I picked people who had talent and who I knew I wanted to be in the band, but I also did pay attention to the fact that I didn't want a bunch of white dudes in my band. I didn't want a bunch of people that just look like me. It was important because when we go out, it is a ministry. I don't know what else to call it. And if people in the audience can't see themselves on that stage, we fucked up. Women need to be able to look on that stage. People of color, people of, from all walks of life need to be able to look on that stage and see themselves in what we're doing. And that in and of itself creates a safer environment. I talk about my abuse. So I talk about certain things, and people come up and talk to us after shows about these things. They're crying. They're very emotional. We have very emotional shows. And sometimes my ego is not big enough to tell me that everyone in that room is necessarily going to look at my face and say, that's the dude I need to talk to about what happened to me. But maybe they'll look around and see Becky. Maybe they'll look around and see Phil. Maybe they'll look around and see Jared. Maybe they'll look around and see someone that more represents to them visually their experience in life. And they'll be able to find trust, and they'll be able to find that person that they can just walk up and hug and cry for a minute without feeling, on edge or feeling like they have to hold back a little bit. I don't feel like I need to be the end all be all, despite the fact that it's called Nathan Gray and the Iron Roses. I don't feel like I need to be the end all be all at that show. I think that people need to have others that they can look at. And even if it's like one of the opening bands that we bring with us, that they can connect to. Music has to bring that connection. It has to make people feel safe. It needs to make people feel like they have a place in this world. And if we don't provide that, then we're fucking up. And I think that back in the day, a lot of us as bands fucked up. We provided the lyrics and we said the things, but we didn't show it a lot. And we could have done a lot better with that. There's a quote that I've used a lot by A.J. Must. He was an old minister. During the Vietnam War, he would stand outside the White House with a candle. And a reporter came to him and said, you're one guy standing out here holding a candle. What do you think you're going to change? And he looked at the reporter and said, I'm not trying to change the world. I'm trying to make sure the world doesn't change me. And that has been something that I go back to daily. I'm not trying to change the world. I'm trying to make sure it doesn't change me. And if that then inspires others to change, all the better. I can be that cheerleader at that time. But my initial purpose in what I'm doing isn't to get out there and change the world. I am making sure that this darkness does not affect me and does not harden my heart.
Enough is a podcast centering on abuse, harassment, and assault in the music scene. To help get the word out, please like or subscribe and share with your friends. If you have been on the receiving end of harm from someone, be it artist, venue owner, audience member, or someone else, and would like to share your story on a future episode, please reach out to us at thisisenoughpodcast@gmail.com. All correspondences are kept confidential.